It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Al, I'd like to start with you. It has been an interesting time in American life. Donald Trump has now been indicted for the fourth time in Georgia. And I guess the question on the table for me today is whether it really matters anymore. We are having a serious moment of fatigue with his indictments. And I suspect most Americans are finding this confusing and not really understandable. And I just want to get both of your points of view on where we are and what this means for not only the Republican Party, but maybe the country as well.
What I'd have to say is that I don't know what the political impact of this is going to be. We've sort of had the indictment of the month club. And if previous indictments are a clue, it's probably not going to affect the race for the Republican presidential nomination. But to be honest, I just can't help but believe that it's going to affect the general election. Another indictment will harden his base, but I just don't think it's drawing more supporters to Donald Trump. And incidentally, in addition to his indictments, he's got a couple of civil suits that if not exactly going to help him either, including the one where a jury of his peers in New York found him guilty of sexual abuse. And the judge said basically in common terminology of rape. You'd think that would disqualify him, but I don't understand Republicans. So Craig can explain why his actions haven't disqualified him. And that was actually found by a jury. I think the Georgia indictment is a little bit different. It's much more comprehensive. It sort of takes all these disparate acts that we've heard about and he puts them together in a criminal conspiracy to steal the election. I think if that story gets told and eventually it will probably be in a televised trial, people, I do believe, will understand that. I mean, it basically shows that Trump is what I've always thought he was, which is a mafia boss. Who knew that his next reality TV show would be the sequel to The Sopranos? So to me, the political key to what all these indictments mean is how the Republican governing class reacts to a year of trials. There was an incredibly interesting discussion, I thought, yesterday morning on Morning Joe with John Heilman and John Meacham. And essentially what they said, there's about 30 to 34% of the electorate that these are the people who stuck with Joe McCarthy after he was censured, who are the sort of the hardcore Trump base. But Meacham exaggerated a little bit, but he said, 48 or 49% vote. It's really 46 to 47. So, but who are those other 12 to 15%? And what they talked about was essentially Republican office holders, party leaders, sort of the Republican political class, a lot of whom know better, but go along with Trump for what they described as three reasons, and I think they're probably right. One, they call them whores for power. I wouldn't necessarily use that term, but they certainly think power is more important than ideology. The old conservative ideology doesn't matter to them anymore. The second group is just fearful of Trump because they're afraid that he'll kill them in a primary. And the third, they use the word that I wouldn't use, but basically they're grifters. They're people who see all the Trump annex as a way to go to and raise money. I mean, Newt Gingrich was out calling for the defunding of the special prosecutor, and my guess is it was in a fundraising pitch. We should have gotten our clue in 2020 when the Republican Party didn't do a platform. because these are the Republicans who actually have to govern, and they're the one who should be shaping the platform. So essentially, what you have is this group of the Republican governing class, which is basically gone along with Trump. They probably know better, but they're going along with him. Some of them may decide they don't want to vote for him, except they don't want to vote for Democrats. So maybe, and then they'll maybe even stick with him. I think how they act and how a year of trials affects them in the end is going to be important. I think about where the Democrats were in the late 80s. Like the Republicans, were sort of intellectually and politically bankrupt. But it was the Democratic governing class that took hold. That's what the Democratic Leadership Council was. It wasn't rank and file. We didn't try to build a lot of supporters on Twitter or their equivalent. There wasn't anything like that then. But we got the leaders together and said, the way we're going to change this party is by having an agenda that is true to our values, but the American people would support. And for the life of me, I do not understand why Republican governors around the country, like Brian Kemp, who was right out front today and yesterday, calling Trump a liar, but why elected officials like him don't get together and say, look, this party has this grand tradition from Lincoln to Reagan. Let's figure out the next way with a real ideology. What scares me the most, though, is because they have not done that. Larry Hogan, incidentally, rather than playing with the third party, should be doing that. That's what he should be doing. He should be helping build a party. We have a binary system. And that's why the third party really scares me, because what scares me is a lot of these people who have been so fearful of Trump and so beholden to him and gone along when they know they should speak up, could very well say, well, I have a way out. I mean, that's what Hogan's done. He voted for his father, he voted for Ronald Reagan, and that's pretty silly, to be honest with you, in a general election where the future of the free world is at stake. I think both were probably dead at the time. But what scares me is that a lot of them will say, okay, well, we'll just vote for a third party candidate. Everybody knows Joe Biden is not the strongest candidate, and his support in the Democratic Party might go down a little bit. Some Democrats may choose that third party, and you wind up with Trump getting 42% and being elected president of the United States, and our democracy is in danger. So what I would say, there is really an extra burden on those governing Republicans, the Republican governors, because I don't think you're going to get it from the leadership in Congress, certainly not from Kevin McCarthy. So to take this into their own hands, and over the next 4 or 5 months, really, even if they don't stop Trump, make it very clear that they have a direction for the party that will save the democratic system, and also make it clear that they're not going to play games with a third party and let Trump slide in the back door, but rather what they're going to do is get this party ready for 28, and in 2024, because we were going to have two main choices: vote for the Democratic Party, but also the Democrat, small d Democrat, and save our country.
Craig, were you surprised by the response from the Republican leadership?
Well, I don't know whether I was so surprised, but I think they're absolutely wrong. I'm a little more optimistic than Al on this, optimistic in the sense that Georgia, to me, is very different. This isn't about documents, which I think is very serious, and I think those indictments are serious. It isn't about causing a a riot and literally death of people on Capitol Hill at an event in Washington, D.C. The case in Georgia, they've got 41 counts, but when you read the indictment, they outline 161 acts where people were engaged in basically corrupt activity, and they're using this RICO approach, racketeering approach, to say that there was an organized effort and a conspiracy to violate the law and to reverse this election. And when I first heard it, I thought, well, I know, not that it's so much I disagree, but I thought it might be reaching too far. When you read the 161 acts, there is no doubt about it. If they have the evidence, and I assume they do. I did think, as Al was referring to this, it's RICO is used with the mafia. It's a little like the mafia, but honestly, I think it's unfair to mafia bosses. I mean, because mafia bosses stayed in the background and they put people out on the street to commit crimes who then got arrested and went to jail. And it was the rare mafia boss that actually was out front. And in this case, the leader of this conspiracy and organization, in point after point after point in this indictment, is Donald J. Trump. So when I say it's different, I think there's more weight to it, and the fact that it's going to be probably pursued in a court with with cameras, people are going to see it. I just think it makes it more difficult. I wish I had a good explanation for why Republican leaders just can't quite see the light here. At the other end of the spectrum is a Republican I served with in the White House, Michael Ludick, who was a judge, considered as a candidate at some points for the Supreme Court, but he wasn't appointed to that. But Judge Ludick, in another interview in recent days with Judy Woodruff, talked about just how totally bankrupt the Republican Party is. He's not even sure there is a Republican Party anymore. And this is one of the most thoughtful people who has for a lifetime called himself a Republican. And I just think there's a lot more of those types of people out there who, when they look at this and they look at the weight of some of the charges that have been made, that they're just less and less likely to think that it makes any sense to advance Donald Trump in his nomination. And as Al said, there's nothing here that seems to bring any support to him. So it gets back then to your question, which is, what does the Republican leadership do if they've continued to back a horse that suddenly comes up lame? What do they do then? And my guess is they try to change horses. I don't know that it's going to work in this election. I honestly think that Republicans may well have to be defeated at the polls at the federal level and the state level for a group to, as Al suggested, kind of be resurrected to rebuild the party. At this stage, the leadership seems incapable of moving in another direction, but there's nothing like a major defeat at the polls to kind of wake people up and cause that to happen. So I'm not surprised with the leaders that we have having their head in the sand, but I do think that the ability to stay there is getting more and more difficult as we move month by month through this process.
Al, maybe I'm reading into this too much, but the New Hampshire polls this week showed that Chris Christie has actually surpassed DeSantis in polling. No one, including all three of us, thought that Christie was doing anything other than doing a suicide mission. Does that give you some encouragement?
Not really. I'm glad Christie is really the one. Actually, Asa Hutchinson, I guess, and Will Hurd have also been outspoken, but Christie is the one with real bite, who's gone after Trump. Asa Hutchinson's too much of a gentleman to do it get wrestling with Trump in the gutter. But so he's up to 8 or 9 or 10% is what he was in New Hampshire. If he finishes second to Trump in New Hampshire, I suppose that's okay. But he's going to have to do a lot better than that, because don't forget, by the time you get to New Hampshire, you'll have a winner in Iowa, and that always changes how people look at who's the second competitor in New Hampshire. So, I don't know. I want to just go back to what we were talking about. I mean, RICO is a really interesting law, because Craig probably knows more about this than I do, but I believe the reason we have the RICO law was to avoid exactly what Craig was talking about, which is the lowlifes in the mafia getting prosecuted and the guy at the top getting off scot-free. And so, which is exactly what Trump shoves his allies under the bus faster than they can produce buses. So, he sort of got caught by that. The thing that I think I'd like to just make 2 more quick points. One, on my side, Democrats need rejuvenation too. In this case, which I think is a unique election, 2024, I think democracy is on the line, and but our candidate is clearly not ideal. He happens to be the only safe choice for people who care about the future of the country. But we need a new generation of ideas, and that's the final point I want to make. I mean, I'm an old man. Craig's a little younger than I am, but he'll catch up pretty soon. People like us are not going to outline the future. And I love what Michael Ludig does. I quote him all the time in the stuff I write. But what made the DLC unique is we had a group of young governors and senators and congresspeople, and who were in their 30s or early 40s. And they were the next generation. And they looked at their party and they said, you know what? We all would like to be president someday. Not all of us will be, but we all would like to be. But we can't be if we don't fix our party. And where is that on the Republican side? Where is that? I mean, Bill Clinton was in his 30s. Dick Gephardt was in his late 30s, or maybe early 40s when we started. Joe Biden was a young man when we started. And all those guys got together and said, we want to fix our party so some of us will have a chance of being president. And so we can lead the country according to our values. Where is it on the Republican side? I think, I cannot believe that there aren't smart, young, ambitious Republicans who look at their party and say, if we don't fix this, we're going to go the way of the Whigs. I mean, it would be ironic if the Republicans who really formed as the anti-slavery party and came out of the Civil War to sort of die, sort of promoting a second Civil War. So I hope that there's a new group of young Republican leaders, conservative leaders, and I'm not a conservative, but I hope they develop a viable conservative philosophy that can rival the Democrats. And we can go back to having a really good, solid debate over where the country's going. And we can forget all this crap of looking on cable TV to see who's indicted and who's going to investigate who and how we're going to have a politics of destruction. That's just crazy.
Craig, you have the last word this week.
Well, all good points to be sure. I worry a little bit, Al, that The problem right at the moment is even worse than you were suggesting, because not only do we seem to lack the people who are stepping up. By the way, Michael Ludick said there is no one on the stage today that's capable of kind of righting the ship of the Republican Party. Not only is it that a problem, but when you look at the profile of, a young governor, Republican governor of Florida, kind of a progressive state, you would think that would be the kind of person that we might look to. But instead, we have a governor who takes on Disney for months and months to prove he's the toughest, guy on the block. Now, by the way, reports are he's kind of backing away from the Disney thing. I'm sure people said that's not really working for you, but it's almost this passion for toughness as opposed to any kind of philosophy that brings people together, or it brings consensus on any of these issues. We just don't seem to be there. I do think that the future is going to end up, in a better place when we get Republicans and Democrats, frankly, but from these out of the states and some of these local offices. But they're slow to emerge. Frankly, I think they keep their heads down. When you look at the leadership of party of which I'm a part now, it's kind of hard to raise your voice and get slammed by not only the leading contender for the presidency on the Republican side, but by other leading Republican officials. So I just think we have to get past this and see what comes from it. I do want to say one thing that I think is important about Georgia, and it relates to local officials. And I think that if no matter how the cases come down, by the way, there's all, not just Trump, but there's all these named co-conspirators. There's an additional 30 or more that are unnamed. And no matter how it comes out, what Georgia has done must have a chilling effect on anybody participating in the 2024 elections. That if you decide to go off the rails, watch out, because these states can indict, the federal government can indict. There's huge consequences to pay. It's, to me, and I don't want to dwell on it, it is unthinkable that the person that's got the same number of felony indictments, I think, as Trump in Georgia is Rudy Giuliani. By the way, we talked about RICO. He knows a lot about RICO because he had much of his career was spent prosecuting mafia bosses, for heaven's sakes. I guess he learned a lot about how they operate. But it's just mind-boggling. But frankly, to me, I speak as a non-lawyer, it's important, I think, that the lawyers who were out there stating as fact things they knew not to be true have been indicted. And again, I think it helps us in the 2024 process to have that as a matter of record, and hopefully people will think twice before they go down the path of either the candidate or some of his indicted co-conspirators.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Program note: Fromm, Fuller, and Whelan will be taking next week off. We hope there won't be an indictment while we're gone. But in the meantime, Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thank you so much indeed. We will see you in the beginning of September.